Okay, do we have everybody? All right, is everybody ready, you guys? All right. So we're here today to discuss the fatal shooting that occurred yesterday afternoon in Spring Garden Township at Rest Haven, York Skilled Nursing and Rehabilitation Facility. I'm giving you this update in person due to the nature of this incident. I'm Dave Sunday, the York County District Attorney. Yesterday, investigators from the Pennsylvania State Police and from my office worked to process the scene, gather video, and conduct numerous witness interviews to determine the chain and sequence of events that led to police response that culminated in the shooting death of Zachariah White, 32 years of age. I personally, with members of my office, reviewed the body camera footage. I also personally went to the crime scene to have a better understanding of what occurred and to make sure that all the residents and the workers were physically okay. In reviewing all known facts, which are obvious and well documented based upon the available video footage, I'm able to relate to you the following as a definitive chain and sequence of events from yesterday afternoon. On May 2nd, 2024, at approximately 12:45 p.m., White left Wellspan York Hospital after seeking and being in the process of receiving medical treatment and reportedly engaging in erratic behavior. White traveled on foot across several lanes of traffic on South George Street towards Rest Haven, York. White entered Rest Haven, York's main entrance by following two other persons into the facility. White remained in Rest Haven, York, where he continued engaging in erratic behavior. Police were dispatched for this disturbance at 12:51 p.m. At 12:58 p.m., a Spring Garden Township officer arrived at Rest Haven, York, shortly after dispatch. Upon arrival, the officer activated his body-worn camera and entered the facility. At this point, White was located in an office off the main hallway. The officer entered the office and verbally engaged White, using de-escalation methods learned from his training and certification in crisis intervention. During this time, the officer attempted to engage White in conversation by building rapport and relieving stress and concerns that White may have had. White accused the officer of not being a real police officer and requested that the officer contact dispatch. The officer assured White that he was a police officer and also contacts dispatch in White's presence pursuant to White's request. White then left the room and is followed into the hallway by the officer. The officer asked White to stay at the office and not roam through the hallways of Rest Haven, York. From there, White went through two doors and ran down the main hallway into a patient corridor where residents were housed. The officer followed White into the patient corridor, calling for backup while pursuing White. Shortly thereafter, the officer deployed his taser and shouted "taser" to alert people, including White, that he was going to do so. The initial taser deployment was unsuccessful, and White continued running throughout the facility. The officer then used his last remaining taser cartridge and deployed his taser a second time, which was successful in allowing the officer the opportunity to attempt physical restraint through the use of handcuffs. The officer repeatedly commanded White to roll onto his stomach, which would allow the officer to place handcuffs on White. White continued to resist, failing to comply with the officer's multiple requests to submit. White rose to his feet and grabbed the officer's taser with his left hand, while simultaneously swinging a closed fist with his right hand 2 times at the officer. After continued physical struggle, White broke free from the officer and again ran down a different residential hallway containing resident rooms and shared common spaces. White then entered a resident's room where 2 residents, both of whom were confined in their beds, and 1 staff member attending to them were present inside. After entering the room, White made an unsuccessful attempt to exit through a window that was patient-friendly and did not allow a person to go through it. The officer entered the room and verbally re-engaged with White, giving him commands to stop, come forward to exit the room, and comply with the arrest. White, who was standing next to a wheelchair, asked the officer for time to catch his breath. White then picked up a large metal removable piece from the wheelchair. He raised it above his head, and he charged at the officer with the metal object remaining at the officer's head level, and in a position to strike the officer in the head. The officer then discharged his duty firearm approximately 2 times. White was struck with these gunshots, which resulted in White releasing the metal object and falling to the floor. White subsequently died after receiving these gunshot wounds. There are aspects of this investigation that are ongoing. For instance, there will be an autopsy and toxicological examination performed on White, ballistic examination, and further interviews. However, the video evidence is clear and decisive. The officer initially employed multiple non-lethal means of engaging with White, consistent with his training. The officer immediately began using verbal de-escalation techniques and only ended using those when White began running through Rest Haven, York. The officer next used taser deployment in an attempt to restrain and arrest White. Despite White attempting to punch the officer twice and knocking away his taser, the officer did not respond with any type of physical aggression towards White. Even when White entered into the residence room with patients and a caretaker present, the officer attempted to use verbal de-escalation commands to have White leave the room and submit to arrest rather than engaging in physical confrontation around the civilians. Only when White charged at the officer using a large metal object as a weapon did the officer draw and discharge his firearm at White. Under any definition of justification in the law, the shooting death of White by the officer was absolutely necessary in order for the officer to neutralize the threat and others from potential serious bodily injury or death. In conclusion, the shooting death of Zachariah White by the officer was legally justified. Moreover, all residents and staff at Rest Haven, York were physically unharmed in what is an isolated incident at their facility. As I stated on prior occasions, I continue to remain in awe of the discipline and bravery shown by law enforcement in unbelievably tragic and difficult situations such as this. They put their lives on the line every day, and this is another example of why they deserve our support from the community. Finally, although justified, we mourn the loss of life and recognize how such tragic events impact everybody concerned. The family and friends of Zachariah White, the officer and his family and friends, as well as the entire Spring Garden Township Police Department, the law enforcement community, the residents and the staff, and the family members of the residents and staff at Rest Haven, York. My deepest condolences and sympathies go out to every single one of you.
Was White at Wellspan York for mental health treatment?
So we don't have definitive facts regarding why he was at York Hospital to begin with. So we have not obtained those definitive facts yet. All we can say is that he was in York Hospital for something, as it was indicated by the fact that he was wearing a hospital bracelet during the incident.
So did you walk down the driveway of the hospital and then make his way across the street? And why did he go to the nursing home if you know?
We don't have the answer to that. We don't know why he went to the nursing. We don't know why he went there.
Does he have any connection with the
No.
nursing home?
No.
He was free to go. He wasn't being detained at the hospital.
We don't have definitive facts to that point, but I have no reason to believe that he wasn't free to go from the hospital. Like, I've never heard anything during the course of the investigation to lead me to believe that for any reason he was being held in the hospital.
So, in essence, and I don't want to characterize this the wrong way, in your opinion, is this an individual who was mentally or psychologically impaired, and as a result of this instability caused this to happen?
What I can say is at this point, as the Pennsylvania State Police conduct this investigation, we will learn much more about the nuances and the specifics of where he was prior to this and what may have been going on with him. We cannot say definitively what that may have been, be it mental health or substance abuse or a combination of the two. We're in the process of determining that.
Are you able to explain in detail how he was able to get into Rest Haven?
All I can say is, so based on the investigation, and just like I said earlier, he essentially walked into the facility behind two individuals that were authorized to be there.
How do you spell Zachariah?
Zachariah, common spelling.
And he's 32, he was 32.
Yes, ma'am, yeah.
Did this guy have a history with either York City or, where is he from York?
My understanding is, no, he's not originally from York.
Where's he from?
He's from multiple different places.
Where was he residing?
He was residing. We can say that he was residing at a facility in York City. And I know that'll obviously, there'll be a follow-up question to that, but at this point, I'm not at liberty to say what facility that was. But he was at a location within the city of York. That's where his official address was.
I'm going to ask it anyway. I mean, was it a drug rehab facility? Was it a mental health facility?
See, I don't know what all services are at this facility, so I would hate to answer that question. And that's what we're investigating right now, is determining why he was in York to begin with, just to make sure. So, and I'm not evading the question. I don't have that answer. So.
Any of his family participating in the investigation to maybe give some history about previous behavior that might explain what led to yesterday?
So we'll be able to put a lot of that together through the course of the investigation. And what I can say is, that his family, they're not in Pennsylvania. And so prior to coming out here today, we called his mother to let her know exactly what I would be saying during the course of this press conference and talk to her, which is always extremely difficult, especially when someone's in another state.
What state?
It was Connecticut.
He was shot inside the room. Did he pass away inside the room?
I don't know exactly when he officially passed away. I know that there was obviously medical care rendered to him there. He was taken to the hospital, and at some point he subsequently died from his wounds. Yes.
How many shots?
There were two, based on our investigation, there were 2 shots discharged from the firearm.
And where
Yes.
were they hit?
And based on the investigation, he was struck in center mass.
You said Spring Garden officer got there at 12:58. Do you know when shots were fired? Like, how long is this whole encounter?
The entire encounter from beginning to end was, we actually determined that, 5.5 minutes.
What was the call that they made? Like, what was it that had them finally say we need to call the police?
So what I can say based on the investigation of what we said today is that, he walked into one of the entrances following other individuals, and once he was inside that entrance, and this is all on the body camera footage, once he was inside that entrance, he just became behaving erratic. It was clear that he had no legitimate reason to even be there. He was acting, like I said, in an erratic manner, and that ultimately triggered the call to 911.
They didn't try to get a hold first, say, hey, you can't be here.
I'm not really sure at this point. I'm not really sure.
So yesterday you said that there was no danger to employees or to the patients there. So basically,
I said that no employees or patients were physically harmed by the incident.
that's right.
Which is different than there not being any danger.
So now in retrospect, is there anything that would suggest differently?
No, what I said was that no patients, or what I actually said was no residents or employees were harmed. Yeah. And so that hasn't changed in any way. They weren't physically harmed. I mean, people were obviously extremely upset, extremely emotional, scared. I mean, there were people there that were terrified. And it was important to make sure, we felt that it was critical to let the community know that, because people have loved ones in there, that those individuals, were not physically harmed by what was going on inside.
I'm sure there's or if it hasn't toxicology on this guy?
Yes.
I mean, are you testing for whether was on something?
Oh, absolutely. There's our coroner obviously has ordered a full autopsy with a full toxicology that would let us know exactly what was in him at the time of this incident. Yep.
And how long was he in York before this
Yeah.
incident happened?
We're not really sure. We're still investigating that.
And are York police or any other suburban police departments knowledgeable about this guy? Does he have a history, police history?
Well, I can't go into that right now. I can't. But what I can say is this entire investigation is being done by the Pennsylvania State Police, and I have no doubt that they are going to be extremely thorough, and they're going to utilize all the methods that are available to them as a law enforcement agency to identify all the facts pertaining to the situation, to include, obviously, what his background was and how we got to this place.
Can you say who the officer was?
No,
Or his rank or his language?
not at this point, no.
Was it a veteran officer?
Not at this point.
And I just want to confirm it was the Spring Garden Township.
That is correct, yes. That is correct.
Will the
Thank you.
footage of Dr. Adlai walking in be released? Is there any footage of him walking in?
The footage that we watched was the body cam footage, which covers when the police officer arrived on scene all the way through to the very end. I can't state right now whether or not the Pennsylvania State Police have identified, or the hospital has video footage with regard to his movement in between.
But there's no security footage at Rest Haven, showing at the front of the building, people walking in and out?
Not that I've observed to this point. Yep. All right. Thank you, everyone. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Pennsylvania State Police just don't
Yep.
investigate it or not. That won't conclude for a while.
Yeah.
But you stood here today and said
Yep.
that this appears to you.
Yes.
This is a legally justified
Yes.
shooting. Isn't that kind of putting the cart before the horse? Should you wait for the investigation to be done?
So in this case, and in some cases where we have body cam footage that cover the entire incident from A to Z, it becomes beyond convincing. It's clear and convincing that it would be legally justified. That being said, as we continue our investigation, just like we would in literally any other case that exists, I mean, clearly if something would come up in the course of that investigation that would take us in a different path, we obviously would clearly visit that. But what I can say is, based on the body camera footage, it's clear and convincing. I couldn't see any reason to not make this statement now, because I think it's important when we do have that information, when it is covered on body cam from beginning to end, that we make this known to the community.
Quick question. If you didn't say it already, I think the officer's on some sort of administrative leave, but that's like a procedure.
You'd have to reach out to Spring Garden Township on that. I mean, based on my experience, that is the protocol.
Yeah. And then, what was the metal object? Do you know what he picked up out of the wheelchair?
So it's a metal footrest that goes on the bottom of the wheelchair.
Did you say he was from Connecticut?
What I indicated was that his next of kin was in Connecticut. That's it.
Did the officer indicate to you that he felt his life was in jeopardy as a result of this assault with this piece of metal?
I can't go into that part of this investigation. I can only state what I saw on the body cam footage. And remember what the legal standard is in Pennsylvania. And so that's...
So you haven't spoken to the officer yet, right?
I'm not going to go into the course of I'm not going to speak to anything else within regard to this investigation, as the Pennsylvania State Police are still conducting it.
And how big was this piece of metal?
Based on what we observed, what about?
Foot and a half?
About 1.5 to 2 feet long. So that's it. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate you for coming out today and covering this.
Witnesses told us that he had been complaining that somebody was chasing him?
I'm not familiar with, I didn't hear that. So, yep. Thank you.
Expect the autopsy results?
Typical, 3 weeks, typically. All right. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. Thank you.